I'm really pleased to welcome Laurie Fermor, who is one of the co-founders of Freddie's Farm, on today's show. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you very much for having me.
I have brought you in today because I really want to talk about something that I think is basically your specialist subject. Some of our listeners may remember that a few months ago we recorded a show called UTF, our UPFs, UPFs being ultra processed food. And it was a very entry-level discussion about additives and things. But I've actually, as you saw on my social media, this is where this whole conversation sprung from. I've just started, I'm nearly finished actually reading Ultra Processed People, the book by Chris Van Tulleken. I believe you've read that as well, haven't you?
I have, and his excellent program as well, that's available to watch still on BBC as well, which is fantastic.
It's what's really fascinating, and I think the place I want to start is I had understood before I read the book properly, but when I just skim read it and listened to a couple of the podcasts, that the problem with UPFs was about the chemical sounding ingredients, the things you wouldn't find in your kitchen cupboard. But actually what I've come to really understand in a number of different examples and ways that Chris is very, very erudite about explaining is that it's actually not about the food item itself, which may have started out life as something that's quite nutritionally sound, but it's actually about the process that food has gone through, isn't it? Can you talk to me a little bit more?
Combination. Yeah, so I think it's a combination of everything. From a very basic point of view, you're in the supermarket, you pick something up. First thing you have to do is look on the back of the box. Are there ingredients that you don't have in your kitchen cupboard? That's a big warning sign. Something you can't pronounce, you haven't got in your cupboard. And I think that's the first thing to look at. But when we delve into it deeper, it's not just about the ingredients, but the processes that they have gone through in order to get to the final product. And that is where it can become, I think, much trickier for the consumer, and the whole ultra processed debate becomes overwhelming for people. And I think, as you were finding, it makes people very defensive, especially when it comes to food they're feeding their children.
Absolutely.
Go.
Let's come back to children because, you know, you make a very valid point, and you obviously, Freddie's Farm is a children's snack product, so you feel very passionately about this. But can I just ask you more to explain what you meant about the process the food went through? So surely, like, an onion is an onion, an apple is an apple, or is that not the case?
No, definitely not. So while it might say apple on the ingredients of something, the more that is done to that apple, for example, and the further away you get from that piece of fruit, the worse it is for you. On a very basic level, taking an apple, brilliant. Apple juice, not so good. An apple flavored gummy bear, terrible. And it's the level of processing that that apple goes through. And that's one thing. Obviously, our area is children's snacks. We start with fresh ingredients, mainly apples from our farm in Kent. And if you look on the back of the packet of a lot of other children's fruit snacks, the base ingredient is apple. But the difference is how little we at Freddie's Farm process it and how much other companies process theirs. And when the cellular structure is broken down in the apple to such an extent that the natural sugars in apples can start to behave in our bodies and our children's bodies like added sugars. And that's where, while it may be apple on the back of the packet, it's no longer behaving like an apple within our bodies.
Okay, so for example, there are some brands who create a fruit-based snack or product, or I'm just using yours as an example because this is what we have in front of us. And from my understanding, some of those other products are created by a factory or processing facility where they've bought in a puree or a concentrate. Can you explain what... I mean, apple puree to me sounds quite benign. I might have fed my kid homemade apple puree. How is this apple puree that we're talking about different?
Yeah, so I think most people will kind of see like a concentrate and be like, we know that's bad, but puree sounds quite good. The issue is, so in the structure of the fruit in this example, an apple, there's a bond between sugar and fiber. When that bond is broken, that sugar becomes a free sugar. So when the bond between the sugar and fibre is broken, that sugar can be really readily absorbed by our bodies, our children's bodies, and give us sugar highs. And it's not the natural way we were supposed to be consuming an apple. Now, those bonds can be broken by creating a puree by blending something when you are physically breaking those bonds apart, or if you cook something. You're cooking a product to a high temperature, which I think every other brand does. By baking it, you are also breaking any other bonds that were left intact. At that point, these natural sugars start to behave like added sugars in our bodies, triggering insulin responses and all sorts, and your body feels that it's consuming artificial added sugar. And this isn't just the case with apples, this is with any fruits or vegetables. And by all means, fruit snacks are not the best thing to be feeding your child. It should always be fresh fruits and vegetables, but we need to choose things where as little is being done as possible to the raw ingredient. So it doesn't matter if it is an apple or a pear or a banana, it's what is then done to that we have to think about as well.
Yeah, that's a good example. One of the examples I heard was, say you're buying a microwavable meal. We all have to do it sometimes. It just needs must. And you look at the ingredients and it says there's apples and not apples, probably in a microwavable meal. Let's say carrots and onions and things like that. But the question is, in that factory, did the onion start life as an onion, and did somebody lovingly chop it up and fry it off as you would do at home? Or was it bought in an industrial bulk quantity of powdered onion that had already been cooked and processed and fried and goodness knows what else done to it before it was then added to your meal? And that is where I think none of us can possibly know that for everything, can we? I mean, how can we possibly tell the difference between whether something has been ultra-processed in our food or it hasn't?
It is. I think it's incredibly hard. And even when you're in the industry, it is very hard. I think, though, to an extent, there is sort of a level of common sense, and you've got to look at the product and see like how closely related is this to the raw ingredient that it says it comes from. There's a lot of, again, going back to kid snacks, but I think they're called fruit twists, and it sort of resembles like a cheese straw, cheese string, but the colours are so vibrant, it looks like Haribo sort of twisted together. And deep down, I think we know that has never seen an apple or a banana or a cherry in its life. And the other one that really gets me is veggie straws. In some brands of veggie straws, the ones that you see for toddlers, there's actually fewer vegetables in veggie straws than there are in our fruit shapes, for example. And a lot of these products have been designed, not only are the ingredients not great, but they've been designed in such a way to make them hyper-palatable and very easy to overconsume. There's very little chewing involved in them for children, which isn't then triggering that response that they're full. And they have been designed in such a way to encourage overeating to help increase profits.
And
which
that,
I think
it's terrifying. It is terrifying because I think about it and I've got an absolute weakness for skips. I love them. They're probably the most UPF thing out there, I now know. But I've often nailed one bag and then had another bag quite happily on top of the first portion because it's neither filled me up, but all it's done is made me crave more because it sort of just dissolves into pap, doesn't it? And it's this whole consumption. Chris Van Tulleken really explains, as you've just have, that the process of chewing triggers a response in the brain and the gut to say you should be nearing fullness. And actually, if you're having really pappy food, if it's very soft and if it melts in your mouth and you just swallow it down, or it's a puree, you're not getting that feedback loop. So your body just says, more please, and you just keep eating.
You do. And I was explaining that to my children the other day. We were talking about bread and the difference between, say, for example, sourdough bread, that I like to make it as much as I can with the kids. I mean, and mine isn't the best. It's quite hard to chew. But you can't. It's really hard to sort of nail half a loaf of sourdough bread. It's quite tiring. But a loaf of processed supermarket bread, you can get through slices and slices and slices of it without being full, without even really realizing, because there's no real chewing involved. And I think there was another great one with Chris Van Tulleken. He was talking about the Pringles tube. I don't know if you've heard this. That is designed in such a way that it was hard for people to get your hand into. And they talked about making it bigger, but they kept it small because it brought out that kind of like a bear that's trying to kind of dig something out. It's like that hunter-gatherer instinct in your brain to make you keep going back, which is terrifying.
Yeah, that almost risk-reward, which is what social media is based on, that is the next thing going to be brilliant or is it going to be awful? Awful, awful, brilliant. And it keeps you coming back because the reward is inconsistent, which makes it so addictive. Also, he was saying about Pringles, the shape is designed almost perfectly to sit on the human tongue, to tantalize every single different area of the tongue and to deliver as much flavor as possible. But essentially it is just potato starch. There is nothing really else there. There's certainly nothing of any nutritional value. And their entire marketing campaign is designed around the fact that it's addictive. When you pop, you can't stop. They've literally done it on purpose. They're not even trying to hide.
The fact that I think that we are being manipulated in that way, and our children are being manipulated in that way, is something that really worries me. And I think especially not getting them used to flavors and textures from a young age is a problem, because I think nearly toddlers in the UK get nearly half of their calories from ultra processed food. I think it's 47%, and that rises to 59%, I think, by the time they are 7. Which shows that it's just encouraging an over-reliance on these foods. They're not used to fresh flavors. They're not used to difficult textures, which has not only a knock-on effect from a health point of view from eating the ultra-processed food, but the lack of chewing that they have by having pouches of puree, by having veggie puffs and fruit shoots and all these things. We're seeing as well that their jaw muscles and bones are not developing properly, and it's leading to physical deformities. It was a study done in Spain, and something really, really needs to be done about this.
It's absolutely insane, isn't it, when you start to think about it? I think one of the things that I found so hard about the whole concept is I like a lot of this food. I know it's designed for me to like a lot of this food, and I'm eating it regularly, and yes, I've definitely given it to my kids regularly, and it's I guess it's like back in the 50s when everyone had said smoking was great for you, and then suddenly they turned around and said smoking's not great for you, but everyone's addicted by then, and they're all going, well, what do you mean it's not good for us? Now it seems laughable, but I imagine there was a big pushback when people first started to say smoking is dangerous for you, and actually Chris does draw a lot of parallels with the addictive nature of nicotine, doesn't he, throughout the book? And I think I had this moment of, I could see why I was pushing against it. I didn't want to be told I was wrong. I didn't want to be told that some of the things that make my life more convenient and a little bit easier for me, and a little bit easier for me as a working parent, were actually doing us harm on many different levels. I think for me, it was not just frightening, but I felt attacked.
And I mean, I don't blame you. I completely get that. But I think the important takeaway is it's not your fault. It's not parents' fault. We've been doing our best, and we have been believing what is all the marketing messages, what's on the fronts of these packets, because, well, it wouldn't be allowed to be sold if it was bad for us or bad for our children. And we're leading busier and busier and busier lives, and we do need quick fixes. And I think it is nigh on impossible to avoid all ultra-processed food. I think it's being conscious about the small changes that add up that you can make, but it's not parents' fault. I don't think the over-reliance on ultra-processed food is laziness or lack of trying. It's hard to make the right choices, even when you're really, really trying to, because of what's there. But I think I view our job as a food manufacturer to bridge that gap between nutrition and convenience. We can't get everybody overnight just eating fruits and vegetables and meat and cheese. That's the goal, but it's not going to happen straight away.
Yeah, and I think, adding to your point that it's not your fault, it's quite literally somebody else's fault, in that the government nutrition information that we have been fed over the last few decades. I mean, I can remember a couple of years ago, I listened to Dimbleby speak about the National Food Strategy. He'd been working at DEFRA, and he gave this incredible talk about how the correlation between government advice and an immediate worsening of public health. This is then reiterated and corroborated by even more studies in Chris Van Tulleken book, because the reports that are coming out are actually funded by big food. It's utterly shocking.
It is terrifying, and I don't think it's fair to say, when you look at sort of rising rates of obesity and how they just spiked, and I don't think, and this is something that Chris talked about in the BBC programme, was that collectively, as a nation or as a population, everybody just didn't just lose control all at once and just thought, sod it, I'm just going to eat whatever I want. That didn't happen. People were not obese. It is because the foods have been designed in such a way to make us eat and overconsume all the time. And a lot of the reports are funded by the companies that are doing this. And I think you can see that there's so much conflicting advice that we should all be drinking skimmed milk and not eating eggs and not having full fat anything. And now it's swung completely the other way. And I do think that for the vast majority of the general population, 1 week red meat's good for you, the next week it's going to kill you. We need to drink more milk. No, we need to drink oat milk. Red wine's great for you. Red wine's going to kill you. They don't know. They don't know where to start, what to do anymore. And I think by being overly prescriptive as well, which is something I think we need to be careful about in the ultra-processed debate, is that you can just drive people the opposite way.
Yeah.
You've got to give people stepping stones and easy swaps so that we can get everybody towards the end goal, because it's too daunting, it's too overwhelming, and people will just go, well, I don't know what's healthy, I'll just give them a bit of chocolate instead, at least they'll like it.
Exactly. And when all the labelling is incorrect, that I think is where it's really difficult. So you're sat there, you've rushed into Tesco or wherever because you really quickly need to get some food for the kids. You've picked a couple of sandwiches. All right, they're a bit ultra processed, but might be all right. And then you've got 2 snacks, and then they've got traffic light systems, or they've got whatever it is on there, and you're comparing 2 things. And it's only if you know industry information about how those different things are made that you could possibly know that this one is full of chemicals, which is why its sugar's really low, and this sugar does look high but actually is real God's honest sugar. That is, I think, the worst part. And it's all of us, even people working in the industry, we are all having the same debate of how difficult this is and how we lack the correct information and guidelines.
It's too simplistic, I feel, to look at the nutritional information on the back of a packet. And I am in favour of the new HFSS guidelines, and I think people should be reformulating products to make them healthier, but only if they're genuinely making them healthier and not swapping out sugar or honey for an artificial sweetener for the sake of getting a number down at the back of the packet so they can put it near the tills in a supermarket. That's not helping anybody. If anything, that's just making the situation worse at that point. And I mean, you talk about the traffic light system, and it's not applied to infant products. I understand that, but parents will use, and as they should do, things like the NHS Smart Swaps app. And if you scan our product, for example, it comes up with the traffic light, red traffic light for sugar, and there's 2 little evil sugar cubes that pop up and tell you this is terrible for you, and then suggest you swap it for Frutella or Starburst, which I really don't think is what parents should be being advised by the NHS or anyone else.
Is that true? That's insane.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking. Freddie's Farm, you should be swapping it for a sugar-free Frutella jelly duo, and I think the first ingredient on it is like maltitol and sorbitol and all sorts of, I mean, just something you should never be eating, full stop, and definitely not feeding to a child in the place of something that is made of a dried bit of apple.
Wow. That is terrifying. So I understand your product range, you have a patented process, so you probably can't tell me too much about the patented process, but how is it that yours are so different? I get the concept that the apples have literally come off the orchard outside your facility, then what?
So where other brands would cook it into a puree, like you would make like an applesauce, or blend it up in a blender, what we do in trying to keep as many of the bonds between the sugar and fibre, we roughly grate it. So we've got nice big chunks where we haven't broken down the cellular structure. So we grate the fruits, the vegetables, we then let it settle and we remove any of the fruit juice that's escaped from that, where those free sugars are. We take that away. So there's not no free sugars in it, but we are minimizing them wherever we can. At the next stage, where somebody would then go on to bake the product, we dehydrate it at an incredibly low temperature. So we're preserving those bonds again before very gently pressing them into the bars or the tractor shapes. And it's those sort of steps that keep the free sugars lower than our competitors. And I think it is a patented process. It's very clever. We've developed it over many years, but the beauty of it is in the simplicity and how little we are doing to the fruits and vegetables. And it's what we feed our children and why we started it, because coming from a manufacturing background, we looked at everything else on the shelves and just thought, not in a million years are we going to put that into our children's bodies. And we wanted to do better for our kids and the nations.
It's one of the things that's the most clear about your products. I buy them for my kids, and
thank you.
I've always noticed from the beginning, as soon as you open it, it looks like how you'd expect apple to look. And I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but it is slightly brown, isn't it?
Yeah, it's brown. It's rough around the edges. The criticism we get is the fruit shapes, they're supposed to be tractor shapes. And because they don't look like tractors. You're like, well, that's a good thing. I mean, we could make them look more like tractors. You look at the other ones, like, for example, the bear paws, they're shaped into like perfect cookie cutter paws, but that is a result of over processing. Ours have texture, you've got to chew them, you can see the bits of fruits and vegetables in it, which is really important. We don't need to hide that from children, and especially from parents. I think that they don't have to take our word for it. They can see the bits of fibre, they can see bits of beetroot, they can see bits of spinach in it, and hopefully they know that we're not pulling the wool over their eyes, and they can trust us because they can see it for themselves.
Absolutely. And then, so that product that is fibrous and it does require some chewing and things, how does that then respond inside a child's body that would be different to, say, Bear or a fruit winder or one of these other kind of equally healthy fruit snacks that aren't really maybe quite as healthy? What's the difference there?
So we haven't done sort of extensive testing on children. I mean, very much anecdotally with our own children, we can see, and we've heard from countless customers, that when they eat Freddie's Farm, they don't have that kind of hyper sugar high that you see with other things. But what we have had a lot of feedback on is there's a lot of diabetics that eat Freddie's Farm. And I'm not recommending them for diabetics. I think everybody's body reacts differently. But people that use Zoe and people that are diabetics that are tracking it on their continuous glucose monitors, they don't get the same spike as they do from other dried fruit and other dried fruit snacks, which is amazing. And it shows that we are doing what we say we're doing.
Yeah, and I did the Zoe app and I loved it. Have you tried it?
I haven't actually. I've been meaning to do it, but I've heard from other people, and there's some other mums at school where the kids go to school, and they've said that Freddie's Farm comes up as like safe to eat, kind of keep going, which is wonderful.
That's amazing. I wish I'd tested it now. I mean, that was the whole premise behind this blood sugar monitor, because you wear a blood sugar monitor as if you were a diabetic for 2 weeks, and then you keep a food diary, and every single thing you eat during those 2-week periods is then monitored and cross-referenced with what's happening with your sugar. And so you're taught to test it. You eat normally for a few days, and then you're given some meals. Have it at the beginning of the day, have it at the end of the day, have it after walking, and to see how you can flatten that sugar curve. So bad is when it shoots straight up like a spike and comes straight back down, and you do feel awful. And good is when it comes in slowly and it leaves slowly. And so what we're really saying is that something like Freddie's Farm or an apple actually just picked off a tree is going to have a sugar response. Of course it is. It's supposed to. You're putting energy into your body, but it should come in slowly and it should leave slowly. It shouldn't have this huge impact on your body that actually is shocking you.
Exactly. And I think aside from sort of the health aspects of that, especially with children or with us, once you have that high and then that crash, what your body craves is something to pick you back up again. And then you see that spiral sort of start where anybody with children that's been to a birthday party, by the time the party is over, like everyone is in tears. They've had the Haribo, they've had the cake, they've run around like lunatics, and then they crash. And then you think, I need to give them something to kind of perk them back up. And they're just going through this horrible cycle of highs and lows and highs and lows, which from a health point of view, awful, but also psychologically is terrible. And I think especially with school snacks, what they're being fed at school, I think that has to be looked at really, really closely. Certainly with my own children's school, I have had some issues with the puddings and things that they were being given. And it's lovely that of course they should be having a treat, but it should be a treat once in a while. Nobody needs profiteroles on a Tuesday afternoon and then get cross with the children for not sitting down and concentrating. That's not their fault at that point.
Wow, is that what was happening?
Yeah,
profiteroles sounds rather posh.
I think I would use, I don't know how good the profiteroles were, but there was a profiterole at one point. There's a lot of cookies and brownies, and that's great, but once in a while. But I don't know about you, I don't sit down for lunch on a Wednesday afternoon to a full hot pudding every day.
I wish I did. It sounds marvellous.
But no.
But
you would need a little nap, wouldn't you, afterwards? Because you'd be tired, you'd be full. You can't sit down and then try and absorb and assimilate a huge amount of information.
And were you successful in this conversation with the school about nutrition?
Yes, they were very responsive at the beginning, but there was actually quite a lot of pushback from parents to reintroduce puddings again, mainly because children were not eating their main course and they needed the pudding to fill them up, which to me, that just prompted a whole nother debate. But yeah, no, there's definitely been some positive changes and introducing things like some cheese and crackers or just plain Greek yogurt with a little bit of honey. There's lots of fun things that they can have that it feels like pudding, feels like a treat, but it isn't going to affect their learning, their behaviour and their moods and their mental health.
Yeah, I mean, this is so important, isn't it? I know this has been quite a hard-hitting episode in terms of, it's quite difficult subjects we're talking about, so I kind of want to end it on a light note about the easy things we can do, because nobody's going to change overnight. I certainly am not. I did have a packet of Skips the other day, but I felt really guilty eating it. It's not going to happen immediately, is it? What are the easy things we can just start with to just make a few steps in the right direction without trying to be perfect? Where would you start?
For me, I think it's looking at the things that you eat most regularly and whether those things that you're giving your kids, what are you having for breakfast? Is it a sugary cereal? Could you swap that for a boiled egg? It does take more time in the morning, but it doesn't take that much more time. A bit of decent bread, a boiled egg for breakfast, a bowl of porridge for breakfast. Those little steps, swapping breads, mass-produced supermarket breads out where you can. If they like a yogurt, why not swap a really sugary yogurt? That was one of the things we swapped at the school was yogurts that had almost 8 grams of sugar, which was almost more than a toddler should be having in an entire day, was in one pot of yogurt. Just swap that for a Greek yogurt and they still love it. Little drizzle of honey, everybody's happy. And I think it can seem overwhelming, and I think we need to remember that food is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be to bring us together and where conversations happen around the dinner table. I just want parents, and I want to be able to say yes more often to my kids for things that I know is good for them, knowing that food can be delicious and healthy at the same time, and just to be able to say yes more.
No, thank you. That's really helpful. I think for me, what's happened since I started reading the book a few weeks ago has just been scratch cooking a little bit more during the week. I can't be perfect. I have a very busy job. My husband has a very busy job. We can't scratch cook every single night. But I've taken more time on a Sunday to create something and make too much of it. So that's one meal at least done in the week. And then working out which days the kids don't finish too late after clubs and goodness knows what else we're carting them around the country to do. You know, there's another night that we can scratch cook and we can make a risotto or we can make a spaghetti bolognese from mince rather than a quick packet. All these things are really helping, I think.
I think it's finding nice, quick, easy things that you can incorporate into your life. And often the simplest dinners are the quickest and easiest ones. If we're really stuck, we end up having scrambled eggs. We have breakfast for dinner, and often that's great, and it's far better than something that's come out of the freezer. But yeah, it's just lots of little things that adds up, and I just never to find it overwhelming. Just all those tiny steps make a huge, huge difference. And yeah, swapping out your unhealthy fruit snacks for some Freddie's Farm.
Excellent. And forgive yourself the odd burger. That's my takeaway.
Well, enjoy it, but enjoy it. It's a treat. Enjoy that treat. Savor every moment of it. And then the next day, go back to your regular healthy things.
This is brilliant. Thank you so much, Laurie. Thank you for coming to share all this knowledge that you've accumulated with Freddie's Farm. It's been really enlightening. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Fab. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.